Bonjour.
Hello, please. I ask you to accompany me in taking refuge and generating bodhicitta.
Sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu parado dane chamsu Dagi jinsu jibe sunam jinro lai benchir sanje ro parashu sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu parado dane chamsu che dagi jinsu jibe sunam chi Rolai penchira sanje ro parsho sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu pardo dane chamsu che dagi jinso jibe sunam che Rolai penchira sanje ro parsho semje tamchi Jodan Dembara Churchi Dongara Dan Dongara Che Jodan Travara Churchi Dongara Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Hindravara Churchi Nirin Chadan Tan Charvya Tanyom Chembola Nebara Churchi Semje Tamche Dewa Tan Devi Jodan Dembara Churchi Dongara Dan Dongara Je Jodan Travara Churchi Dongara Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Hindravara Churchi Nirin Chadan Tan Charve Tanyom Chembola Nebara Churchi Semje Tamche Dewa Dan Devi Jodan Dembara Churchi Dongara Dan Dongara Je Jodan Travara Churchi Dongara Mebe Dewa Tamba Dan Mindravara Churchi Nirin Chadan Dan Charve Tanyom Chembola Nebara Churchi Jumden de jambe yang lai chan tsai lo Kange lo dre nye dre nye dra nam da rab sarve chi nye tun kyun chi chen si chi ni je to kra le bam tse Kanda si be tsun ra ma ri min tu ma dong ra chi sarve ro so kyun la pu chi tar se yan la chu chu yang ten song Chu dre che ro nyu mo ni lo le je ja ro ro tse chen ma ri min sre dong ra nyu gu chi nye chun ze ra je nam Dene ta jen sa ju tar sun yun dene lu zo jar se tu wu ku chu ra chu dan chu ni jen da lu mun seren jan be yang la ndu tse den chu ji chen ra wu sri chi da lu te mo mun ba rab sar ne ka dan den chu shung lu to ba ye lo zhu bo ben tang wa tsar tu sor Na sam je me shera par chen ma je men ga nam ken wo ni so so ra ri shi ju yo wa tu sum ger we yum la chan sa lo Ainsi ai-je entendu en un temps le glorieux séjourner.
Thus I have heard, once the Glorious One was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time the Glorious One abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called appearance of the profound. Also at that time the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahafatma, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. How should a son of the lineage or a daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Sharadvati. Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, apperception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free from stain, undiminished, unfulfilled. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomenon. No eye constituent until no mental constituent, up to and including no mental consciousness constituent. No ignorance, no extinction of ignorance until no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death. There is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds having no obscuration, they have no fear, and passing entirely beyond falsity, they completely pass beyond sorrow. All the Buddhas who abide in the 3 times by relying too on the perfection of wisdom have fully awakened into the unsurpassable, true and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom is the mantra of great insight, the mantra of the unsurpassable, the mantra appearing with the peerless, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering. Because it does not deceive, it should be known to be true. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is stated, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, in that way, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Glorious One arose from that samadhi and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Well done, son of the lineage, it is like that. Son of the lineage, it is like that, just as you have taught it, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced. Even the Tathagatas admire it. After the Glorious One had thus spoken, the venerable son of Sharadvati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, and all of those surrounding, and the entire world with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas in admiration, praised the words of the Glorious One. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Wait a few minutes while the other languages complete the sutra. Thank you. So now, if you would like, we can look at the text itself a bit more in detail. We have already gone over in the previous sessions. We've already gone over the text in great detail in our previous sessions, so today I won't go back to what we've already covered, except in general, And for those who are here for the first time, we can particularly look at the primary statement of the text of emptiness and try to introduce this subject. So to start, we can see that this text includes a title. In the translations that I shared with you, you have the title in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, and then a proposal of translation in English. And then below the title, there is an homage, sorry, in English, homage to the glorious perfection of wisdom. That we find this homage in the Tibetan translation given by the translators. This translation relies especially on the Tibetan translation. The text itself includes 3 parts. First, a prologue, then the main part of the teaching, and then at the end, an epilogue. The prologue itself oh, what's this? Is there a bird? The prologue includes what we call a common prologue that we find in most texts, and especially the texts on the perfection of wisdom. So, first off, the title, the Heart of the Glorious Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. There are numerous works of the perfection of wisdom, or on the perfection of wisdom. All of the other works are much longer. For example, you can find the perfection of wisdom in 100,000 stanzas, in 25,000 stanzas, in 8,000 stanzas. Sometimes we speak of the 17 texts or the 17 writings, the mother and daughter writings, or mother and son writings, depending. Apparently. So among these texts, this sutra is the shortest of the texts on the perfection of wisdom. You've surely seen there are various versions, several versions. One version that is recited most often in China, the Chinese translation of this text, where one recites simply the teaching. The prologue and the epilogue are not included, and we only find the answer, the question, but especially the answer that is given here, given by the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, with the Buddha's approval. So this is the slightly longer version that includes the prologue and the epilogue. The title of the text is named Heart. Of course, let's not confuse this with the idea that we might have in English with a heart referring to kindness or something sentimental. We're not talking about heart in this sense. This is the vital center. This is a translation that doesn't necessarily come from me, but this sutra has already been known by this name, and so this is kind of the accepted translation today. The Tibetan term Ningpo, it has this meaning, heart, but it also can be understood as essential, quintessential. The heart can be understood as the quintessential organ for life. So in this sense, this sutra contains the teaching of the perfection of wisdom that is elsewhere explained in a more extensive way, but here expressed in its most quintessential way. It is the shortest, most essential version. This is how we can understand this term, heart, the heart of the glorious perfection of wisdom sutra, which presents the summarized or essential, quintessential expression of the perfection of wisdom. Then the prologue, the first part, thus have I heard. Once the glorious one was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha, together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. This is considered to be the common prologue. The first part, thus I have heard, once. We can see that this is a teaching that is reported to us following the first council, following the effort to record and safeguard the Buddha's teachings. So here, what is repeated is the first teaching that was heard. So, thus I have heard once. We find this phrase repeated at the beginning of all the Buddha's texts. Thus I have heard once. This I here, when it concerns the sutras, is often associated with the great disciples of the Buddha, the great disciple of the Buddha, Ananda. This I would be Ananda. All of the commentaries don't necessarily agree on this identification, but in general, there is a presentation wherein, on the Buddha's recommendation, the Buddha recommended that in order to protect or conserve the Buddha's teachings, it was necessary to do so in the presence of 500 arhats. And according to the Buddha's instructions, the first council was held with 500 fully realized arhats, who then wrote down, no, they didn't write them down. First, they kept them in memory, and then later wrote them down for future generations. So according to this presentation, the Buddha's teaching is often divided into three main groups that we call the Tripitaka, the three sections, the three baskets, literally. So first is the Vinaya, which covers discipline, ethical discipline, rules for living according to Buddhist practice, particularly the lifestyle rules for monks, renunciants. Then there are the sutras that primarily cover practice, contemplative practice. And then there are the abhidharmas that primarily cover knowledge and wisdom. So these three baskets, these three parts, this division, or these three categories of the Buddha's teachings, reflect the three fields of learning: Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, ethical discipline, contemplative exercise, and development and actualization of wisdom. This text belongs to the sutras, the second part. Then the second part of the prologue: the Glorious One was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha. This is a place that is found in the Ganges plains of the north of India, a central northern part of India. Today it's found in the state of Bihar. At the Buddha's time, India was not yet a united country. It was made up of numerous organizations or entities. Some were kingdoms, some were kind of proto-republics, and there's also a mention of Janapada. Mahajanapada is the term in Sanskrit, the country of India, and Rajgriha was the capital of one of these countries, which was called Magadha. And close to Rajgriha, just outside, there was a place that you can still visit today. There is a hillside, a small peak, and here it is called Vulture's Peak. This is where the Buddha resided when he went to Rajgriha. This is the place where the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom. This sutra also belongs to a certain cycle of the Buddha's teachings. We have this term. The general translation in English is the turning of the wheel of Dharma. The first turning of the wheel of the Dharma concerns the first cycle of teachings. This involves especially the common teachings. Teachings that are common in the sense that they are the foundational teachings of Buddhism, if you prefer. The first turning took place at Rishipatana, close to Sarnath. We spoke briefly about this. This concerns the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. In the writings and the tradition of the Great Vehicle, it is admitted, accepted, that the Buddha turned the wheel of the Dharma on 2 other occasions. In other words, he gave teachings of another type, more profound, expressing reality in a more subtle way, a more definitive way. This concerns the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, which explains the affirmation of the emptiness of substance of all phenomena, as essentially the teachings on the perfection of wisdom. These texts on the perfection of wisdom are considered to have practically disappeared, and then they were recovered and made accessible and spread following the activity of the great master Nagarjuna, who is also the founder of the interpretation of the Buddha's teachings of the school known as the Madhyamaka. There is also a third turning of the wheel of Dharma, a third cycle of teachings, which specifically covers Buddha nature. These are, if you will, the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The perfection of wisdom here concerns the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the second cycle of the Buddhist teachings. It is a text that belongs to the Great Vehicle, and in this way specifically expresses practice as it is understood in the Great Vehicle. So, from the beginning, you can see in the text, among the Buddha's entourage, the audience that heard the Buddha's teachings, it's not simply monks who are a great part of those who follow the Shravaka, the listener vehicle, but there is also a mention of bodhisattvas who follow the Great Vehicle. Bodhisattvas are practitioners of the Great Vehicle. So the first part here is a bit like a testimonial. We can witness that something happened at a certain place, at a certain time, and we also refer to the other people who were present at this time to affirm in a certain way the validity of this testimonial. In a certain way, the prologue has this function of to bring authenticity, to authenticate what follows, that what follows is not an invention, something that was made up later, but is rather confirmed by the tradition and by the entirety of the group of people who were present. In this way, the Buddha's teachings were conserved in the presence of the 500 arhats, as I mentioned earlier. These 500 arhats were either all present for a teaching, or at least a certain number of them were. For example, Ananda repeated the teachings, and they all confirmed that what Ananda repeated was exactly what they themselves had heard, like a common accord, and thus the teaching here is considered to be authentic and valid. This this idea of the prologue refers to this. Thus I have heard once, and the mentioning the name and the assembly of people. This is what we also sometimes call the 5 marvels. Marvelous place, time, teaching, audience, and teaching. 5 marvels. Then also there is the place, Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha, and Great Assembly of Monks and Great Assembly of Bodhisattvas. This is common to all of the sutras of the glorious perfection of wisdom. All of the sutras, all of the teachings on the perfection of wisdom were stated at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha. Then you have the specific prologue. And here there is a scene that is described. We can see the Buddha, who is silent, immobile, still. He's described as being absorbed in samadhi. The commentaries emphasize that for the Buddha, there was no variation between a moment when he's in samadhi and a moment when he's not in samadhi. For example, for a beginning practitioner, our mind is generally confused, distracted, and then we can try not to be distracted and to bring mind to remain still, and then try to contemplate emptiness, for example. So, of course, there is variation, moments of distraction, a moment of non-distraction, a moment of stillness. Whereas for the Buddha, given that he was enlightened, he was at no moment in distraction. There were no moments when he was not, if you will, in samadhi. However, of course, to the audience's perception, sometimes the Buddha spoke, sometimes the Buddha walked, sometimes the Buddha lay down. So, of course, according to common perception, this was the case, but ultimately he was never outside of contemplation of reality, free from all confusion. In other words, in samadhi. So here, on this occasion, the Buddha appears to the audience to be abiding in samadhi. In other words, here he is silent. He does not speak any words. Here, in the following part of the text that we'll see, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is the one who speaks. There's a scene where the Buddha is silent, and the Buddha's most brilliant disciple among the listeners, the Shravakas, Shariputra, asks a question. This question, he asks this question in the presence of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who then speaks and replies to Shariputra. Okay, so at that time the Glorious One abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called appearance of the profound. Also at that time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. So the texts describe many different types of samadhi, but here it's specifically stated that this samadhi is one that focuses on appearance of the profound. This refers to the Buddha's wisdom that sees phenomena both as they appear, however they may appear, but especially as they truly are, which we can understand to mean that an ordinary bodhisattva who has not attained enlightenment, when he observes reality, he does not observe phenomena as they truly are. Only the Buddha has this omniscience of seeing phenomena both as they appear and as they are in the same moment. Then, at the same time, Avalokiteshvara observes emptiness. This is expressed in the text. Also at this time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. So not only does Avalokiteshvara see that there is no self, but even that even what we confuse with being the basis for the self, the 5 aggregates, as well as the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, all of the categories stated in the Buddha's teachings, they are empty of substance, void of substantial nature, empty of being in and of themselves. This is then when Shariputra asks his question. This question, the text affirms that he doesn't ask it kind of on his own. There's a very subtle meaning here. Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva: how should a son of the lineage or a daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? So here we can see, then by the power of the Buddha, meaning that this question would not have come to Shariputra's mind on his own. Shariputra is the most brilliant of the listeners, of the Shravaka. But in fact, in this case, he is bringing up a subject that surpasses him. That of the profound practice of the perfection of wisdom. So the Buddha's presence incites this question. We see here that this teaching, this discussion of reality as it truly is, occurs due to a certain number of favorable conditions that come together. On the one hand, the Buddha, due to his enlightenment, his grace. In other words, his will to help beings, to have sought out enlightenment in order to be able to help beings. And also, all the beings present at this moment had virtuous predispositions that reached maturity at this moment. And thus, the access to ultimate reality became possible, was able to be presented. The question concerns how should a son of the lineage, here this concerns a synonym for bodhisattva, someone who aspires to the practice of the bodhisattvas in the great vehicle, who wishes to cultivate wisdom. How should such a person cultivate this wisdom? The theme of the text, if you will, is the practice of perfect wisdom. We saw that perfect wisdom is knowledge of reality as it is. This knowledge is completely perfected, fully actualized in enlightenment. The Buddha is the one who has fully actualized this knowledge. The practice of wisdom is training in conceptual and non-conceptual means for understanding reality, ultimate reality, that is not something that is constructed. This perfect wisdom is already present in potential, if you will, within us. There is a kind of naturally present wisdom. We spoke briefly yesterday about primordial consciousness, free from all confusion. So the point is to recognize and actualize this natural wisdom. We can speak about Buddha nature in certain teachings. There is mention of Buddha nature. Buddha nature is this reality that has not yet been discovered, that is still veiled. So the path consists in dissipating confusion and fully actualizing this potential for understanding, for realization. So to just say a few words about wisdom. Wisdom, as we mentioned yesterday, we're not talking about the perfection of emptiness. Emptiness, non-self, it is how reality is established. The idea of wisdom implies the absence of wisdom. Today we have non-wisdom, if I may, or ignorance. Sometimes you might hear the terms ma-rikpa, avidya, ignorance, which presupposes rikpa, which is knowledge. But here we're speaking of trying to access knowledge that is free from all confusion. We can approach this, we can perfect it, we can reach its fullness. So the answer here, given by Avalokiteshvara, includes two subjects, if I may. The explicit subject, the affirmation of emptiness of all categories that are taught elsewhere in Buddhism, emptiness of the 5 aggregates, the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, the 12 links of dependent arising, the 4 noble truths, just all the way up to enlightenment. So from matter all the way through omniscience, all phenomena are here affirmed to be free and empty of a self, to be emptiness. That's the explicit subject. And then the implicit subject is the progression of the realization of this emptiness, starting from a practitioner, starting with a practitioner who commits to the great vehicle, all the way through the actualization of enlightenment, the conclusion of practice, full and perfect enlightenment. So the Bodhisattva's path begins by generating bodhicitta, taking bodhisattva vows, conventional or relative bodhicitta. So there's an aspiring bodhisattva who is still an ordinary being, who has not yet understood emptiness, who has not yet realized emptiness, but who aspires to full and perfect enlightenment, moved by great compassion concerning all sentient beings without exception. This is what marks the entry to the great vehicle. Entry to the great vehicle occurs when we orient ourselves toward attaining enlightenment with this view, seeing enlightenment as the way of helping all beings without exception. This is great compassion that aspires to enlightenment. This marks entry to the great vehicle. So concerning the implicit subject, the path, if I may, all the way up to full enlightenment, this is divided into 5 parts that we call the 5 paths. This designation of 5 paths can also apply to various vehicles, such as the Shravaka vehicle, specific to that vehicle, according to the motivation and understanding of wisdom or of practice. We can speak of the 5 paths of the Shravaka, the 5 paths of the Pratyeka Buddhas, and also of the Bodhisattva vehicle. Here, of course, this concerns the Bodhisattva vehicle. The 5 paths are called Tsuklam, which translates the Sanskrit Sambhara Marga, Marga meaning path. Sambhara Tsok means, in Tibetan, the meaning of having assembled or accumulated. In Sanskrit, this has the meaning of having equipped oneself with. The path of accumulation, then, first path, which is followed by Jorlam, which translates the Sanskrit Jor Yoga. The Sanskrit term here translates mostly the idea of preparation, the path of preparation. The Tibetan is more the path that trying to find the term that joins us with I can't remember the common term. So first is the path of accumulation, The second is the path of preparation or junction or application. There are various translations. In any case, it is the Praha Yoga, which is followed by the path of seeing, Darashana Marga, Tonglam, then followed by the Bhavana Marga, Gomlam in Tibetan, path of exercise, path of cultivation, path of perfection, perfecting, path of familiarization, which results in Lakshesha Marga, Milopelam, the path of no more learning, or path beyond training. This is the accomplishment of enlightenment. So this is the implicit subject, and it is completely its own subject of study, which is particularly explained in a text attributed to the great Bodhisattva Maitreya, who is understood in the great vehicle to be the future Buddha. He instructed the great master Asanga. So there exists a text called the Abhisamaya Alamkara, which covers this implicit subject, this subject that is implicit in the text on the perfection of wisdom. This is a subject that is studied during many years in the Buddhist academies or shedras. The monks cover this subject for a very, very long time. Therefore, we can see that it is a subject that goes beyond our weekend of teaching. But so that's a general overview. We will more specifically focus on the explicit subject, emptiness. What do we understand here by emptiness? In the answer here, given by Avalokiteshvara, we can see there are two parts, a first presentation, an extensive presentation, and then an abridged presentation. The abridged presentation culminates in the statement of the mantra. It's found in the mantra. The mantra contains all of the meaning of the sutras of the perfection of wisdom. This sutra here, but also all sutras on the perfection of wisdom. Okay, I see it's 11, so let's take our break now. And then we'll look at the answer in detail and specifically focus on the theme of emptiness.
Nam di tamchi sigba nye toni nyebe ranam pamchi ni chega na che balap truba sibe sole rowa sho. O sanji chodan soji chonam la chanchu parado dane chapsu chi dage jinso jibe sunam chi rola penjira sanji roba sho sanji chodan soji chonam la chanchu parado dane chapsu su chi da ge jin su ji be su nam chi ro lai pen chir san ji ro ba shu san ji chu dan su ji chu nam la chang chu par do da ne cham su ji da ge jin su ji be su nam chi ro lai pen chir san ji ro ba shu sim ji tam ji de wa dan de we ju dan den ba chur ji dong ar dan dong ar ji ju dan cha war chur ji dong ar me be de wa tam ba dan min ra war chur ji ye ren cha dan dan cha we dan nyom chen bo la ne ba shu ji sim ji tam ji de wa dan de we ju dan den ba chur ji dong ar dan dong ar ji ju dan cha war chur ji dong ar me be de wa tam ba dan min ra war chur ji ye ren cha dan dan cha we dan nyom chen bo la ne ba shu ji sim ji tam ji de wa dan de we ju dan den ba chur ji dong ar dan dong ar ji ju dan cha war chur ji dong ar me be de wa tam ba dan min ra war chur ji ye ren cha dan dan cha we dan nyom chen bo la ne ba chu chi chom den de jam be yang lai chan cai lo kang ge lo zhe dim nye zhen zhe nye dra nam da ram sar we chi nye tun gun chi xian si ji ni che to gra le bam zi kang da si be zhen ra ma ri mun tu ma dong ra chi sir we zhou zo gun la bo ji dar se ye la zhu ju yang den su zhu dar che zhu niu mo nie long le ji jia zhu zhu zi qian ma ri mu sir dong ra niu gu qi nie jun zi ra zhe nam den ne ta jian sa ju tar sun yun den lu zo jar si tu yu gu ju zha ju dang na lu mu sir jian bei yang la dun zi den chu ji qian ra bu sir qi da lu de mo men ba ram san ga dan den ju xiong lu dou ba ye lo zhe bo be na wa zar du sar.
So let's come back to the text. The Heart of the Glorious Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. As I indicated this morning, we can split the text into three main parts: the prologue, the main part, and the epilogue. The main part involves two parts. The first part, the abridged part, and the extensive part. The extensive part affirms the emptiness of all phenomena from matter, physical form, all the way up through omniscience. Shariputra, the son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, all the way up through the parts, the mantra of perfection of wisdom is stated. All of that is the extensive explanation of the teaching. And the part that is the abridged The summarized section is the mantra of perfection of wisdom is stated all the way to the end of Avalokiteshvara's reply. Shariputra, in that way, Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train the profound perfection of wisdom. After comes the epilogue. So, then let's look at this part of the text. Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Sharadvati. Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. There's maybe something that needs to be improved with this part of the translation. Well, we'll stick with what we have for now. That even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. Emptiness is not other than matter. Matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, a perception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Sometimes this part of the text, this part called the central statement, that we also call Tong Ni Shijul, the fourfold emptiness. The fourfold presentation of emptiness. Then comes the following part. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free from stain, undiminished, unfilled. This is what we call the eightfold presentation. Then there are the negations of all of the categories. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, all the way up to no attainment, no non-attainment. Then there is the negation of enlightenment. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds, and then this keeps going all the way through true and complete enlightenment. So these different parts correspond to the 5 paths that we looked at this morning. So let me come back to the beginning. Observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. Wait a minute. Observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. This corresponds with the Sambhara Marga. Matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. This is the 2nd path. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic. This corresponds with the path of seeing. And then the negation of the categories. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there's no matter. No matter. All the way up through no attainment, no non-attainment. This is the Bhavana Marga, 4th path. And then, therefore, Shariputra, all the way through unsurpassable, true, and complete enlightenment, corresponds with Laishaksha Marga, the path of no more learning. So first, the practitioner begins by cultivating wisdom. We also spoke about, I believe, 4 observations. Observation of vipassana, shamatha, observation that is the limit of phenomena, an observation that fully accomplishes, that is perfectly accomplished. These are approximate translations. First, a practitioner needs to cultivate wisdom by studying, by listening to the teachings. Listening to the teaching leads to a type of wisdom that we call literally the wisdom of listening, but that is also, we can also call a learned wisdom, that someone has taught us that phenomena are emptiness, so we have learned something, but we have not been able to observe this ourselves. This study needs to be followed by reflection, analysis, and this reflection and analysis leads to truly acquired knowledge, because we have ourselves carried out this analysis and observation that has led us to the same conclusion to what is affirmed in the teaching. We have been able to verify, observe by ourselves, for ourselves, that. So there are 3 types of wisdom. That of the wisdom of listening or learned wisdom, and then the second one from reflection is the first authentic wisdom that serves as a basis that we need to cultivate, and what we cultivate leads to a wisdom of practice, that comes from having trained in practice. It is the conclusion or fulfillment of wisdom. We can distinguish the 3 wisdoms in various ways by relying on analysis or reasoning. As the Buddha teaches, don't rely on do not rely on the don't rely on the teacher but the teaching. Don't rely on the words but on the meaning. Don't rely on the conventional meaning but on the definitive meaning. Don't rely on consciousness but on wisdom, or on primordial consciousness. So, using various means, we accomplish the path of accumulation. Equipment. We equip ourselves. So at this level, we often mention we're specifically talking about vipassana that is a reflection of wisdom, that is conceptual, a conceptual understanding. This conceptual understanding leads to or yields in the ability to going beyond the conceptual and getting a first non-conceptual look. So then we're talking about observation that is a reflection of wisdom, that is shamatha. In this case, the term shamatha should not be confused with shamatha on its own. This is shamatha associated with vipassana. This is the union of shamatha and vipassana, observation that is non-conceptual. So, concerning the path of accumulation, sambhara marga, this is possible, but our familiarization with samadhi, in other words, the ability to let the mind abide naturally in natural stillness, is not yet effortless. We have not yet obtained what we call the fruit of practice that we call shinjong in Tibetan. Sometimes it's translated as flexibility or suppleness, meaning that being able to observe reality of phenomena without effort, that mind can remain in the observation of emptiness and non-duality without effort, spontaneously, that this may take place. This observation, when this occurs, the union of shamatha and vipassana, this is when we have this shinjong or suppleness, when practice can occur effortlessly. Then this is when we begin the Raja Yoga Marga, which is still a reflection of wisdom, the path of junction, second path here. It's not yet authentic wisdom. Of course, each of these paths have different steps that are detailed elsewhere. I'm just kind of giving you the general overview. In any case, this yields or concludes in the path of seeing, that is the realization of emptiness. Direct realization of emptiness. This corresponds to observation that is said to be the observation of the limit of phenomena. This vision, we then exercise it. It is perfected. We familiarize ourselves with it all along the Bhavana Marga, the path of familiarization, where this realization is cultivated up through its insurpassable perfection, which is then the path of no more learning. So this is an introduction, the kind of general view of the 5 paths and how they correspond with the various parts of the text that particularly focus on the understanding at each of these levels. We can see that in the text, he sees that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance, observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. This implies a subject that observes that observes the five aggregates and sees their insubstantiality. This naturally refers to the practice of emptiness as an ordinary practitioner, a first approach, if you will. The second part, the kind of main part of the text, matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. What do we mean when we say emptiness, matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter? What do we mean by this? The term emptiness, as we saw earlier, can be understood in different ways. In terms of a kind of absence or something inside something else, or the destruction of something that existed previously, or the destruction of something that follows. There are various ways of understanding it. I won't come back to the details of this subject. Simply, what do we mean when we say that matter is emptiness? This is the emptiness of what exists substantially. We looked at this briefly yesterday. It's important to understand here the meaning of substance. The term is Rangshin in Tibetan. In Sanskrit, swabhava. Something that exists on its own, that exists in and of itself. The absence of being, of what exists in and of itself. What can we understand by something that exists in and of itself? The term emptiness here it's not my phone that's ringing, it's an alarm. Excuse me. My telephone is on airplane mode, I promise. When we say emptiness here, it means emptiness of being in and of itself. This refers to, if we look at our own experience of reality, reality manifests as a duality, a subject that observes objects or phenomena, and appearances, visible forms, tastes, smells, sounds, tactile phenomena. We attribute names and designation according to our conventions. So neither appearances nor conventions here are the object of refutation. It is rather the grasping that accompanies them, that attributes being in and of itself to them. We observe phenomena, and as what is manifest in appearances is grasped as existing as we see them. In this grasping, we grasp phenomena as existing on their own, in and of themselves. what appears to me is a duality of subject and object. And I will designate subject and object. So there is appearance and then designation that are not directly here the object of refutation. The object is this grasping. I grasp a being in and of itself. That the subject and the object substantially exist independently from each other. That observable phenomena, that we grasp them as being independent. We confuse appearance, designation, and being in and of itself in our grasping. What is refuted here is the grasping, thinking that appearances exist as they are. So let's take an image. We can look in a mirror to see our face. And we think, oh, that's me. And we might think that we exist in the mirror, or we might think that the object in the mirror exists in and of itself, that it exists independently as an entity. And this is a falsity. We don't see that this is a falsity, and we grasp this appearance as existing as it is. In order to better understand this, as I mentioned yesterday as well, we can observe phenomena and try to see, is there something to this phenomena that makes it that it exists in and of itself, that is substantial, that it is established. When we see phenomena, we see that they include parts. So now we can proceed with what we call the analysis of a thing and its parts, mereological analysis. So we can consider a thing. The common example is that of a chariot or a car. We can also use the body as an example. We grasp our body as being one, but it is made up as parts. We could never find the body that exists independent of its parts. There's no body without a head, arms, legs, skin, without a skeleton, without flesh, all of the parts that make it up. There is no body independent of these parts, and each of these parts is also made up of parts. So we cannot find anything that exists independently. Particularly, it is interesting to see that phenomena manifest only through dependent arising, and due to this, they are emptiness. There is this famous analysis concerning the absence of birth or the absence of production. It is affirmed that phenomena do not have being in and of themselves because they were not produced, because they were never born as existing. The first point of emptiness and this absence of being in and of itself, this also means that it is neither existing nor non-existing. We cannot find its existence. Not finding its existence is not finding its non-existence. It's not finding its absence. It's also not finding both. In other words, existence and non-existence together, because they are mutually exclusive. We cannot find existence and non-existence together. Either it's something exists and what exists does not exist, or what is non-existent cannot be what is existing. So we cannot find both. Nor is it the negation of both, an entity that is neither existing nor non-existing. So it's neither existent, non-existing, both, or the opposite of both. The third Karmapa in the Mahamudra Wishes says, it's not existing because when we look for its substance, being in and of itself, not only can we not find it, but even the omniscient Buddha could not observe being in and of itself. But it's also not non-existent because it is the basis for samsara and nirvana. And so you can see that no grasping, thinking, grasping, conceptualization, this is all reification. We are constantly reifying, but the thing that is reified as a thing that exists in and of itself, we can see that this thing cannot be observed, cannot be determined or identified. So in this way, it is emptiness. Now, if we consider the analysis or refutation of birth, of phenomena being emptiness because they are without birth, they are unborn, they have never been born as a substantial entity. For us, we might think the world exists. I indeed exist because it was created, because it was produced. I was created by my parents by their parents, and the world by distinct conditions, by divinity perhaps. All of this produced, created the world, and the world indeed exists substantially because it was produced substantially. So then by analyzing creation, birth, which of course means the emergence, the substantial appearance of the world, this is examining the idea that the world indeed exists because it emerged, because it manifests, because something brought it into being. So then this is an analysis of causality. Causality includes we distinguish cause and effect, a causal field and its effect. Here, this concerns reflecting on the relationship between the cause and the effect. When we ordinarily consider causality, we grasp the cause and the effect as being two distinct entities, as being separate. Causality, then, is the relationship between two substantially distinct entities. Or causality would be not the relationship between two substantially distinct objects, but the process of a single entity. In other words, the cause and the effect are not two phenomena that are distinct, but rather one and the same thing. Or, third possibility, we could imagine combination of these two, that the substantial manifestation of reality is produced by both a substantially distinct entity and by the transformation of a unit. Therefore, the combination of these two elements. Then, of course, there's a fourth possibility, which is thinking that phenomena manifest substantially without a cause that is distinct or a cause that is the same that is at the origin. So what we call ex nihilo emergence, that being in and of itself appears without any cause. So these are the four possibilities. In the Madhyamaka teaching, among these four possibilities, with these four possibilities, we can bring up all of the explanations of causality. We find the explanations given by various religions, doctrines, philosophical fields, by science. We try to observe our reasoning, that we observe reality and therefore it substantially exists. That there is an appearance and I attribute being in and of itself to this appearance. So we try to explain this interpretation without being completely conscious of the interpretation that we bring to it. We are always interpreting things in this way, that because this appears to me in this way, it truly exists. So we try to explain this according to various theories. But whatever the particularities of the theories, all of the theories try to affirm or confirm our intuition, our grasping that the world exists, that it came to exist because it was truly created, either based on nothing, based on itself, based on an other, or both. So those are the four possibilities for production. So now we'll go through the refutation of the four refutations as it's presented in the Madhyamaka to understand the meaning of matter is emptiness and emptiness is matter. Of these four ways of conceptualizing causality, the most common way of conceptualizing causality is thinking that cause and effect are two distinct separate entities. Furthermore, this is in Buddhist schools of philosophy, this is a kind of causality that is accepted, but it's refuted in the higher schools of the Mahayana, specifically the Madhyamaka. If cause and effect were truly, substantially separate, completely separate entities, then it would be possible for anything to produce anything else. There is no reason why obscurity can't produce light, or why acorns can't produce humans, because they are substantially distinct. If cause and effect were two substantially distinct entities, and we maintain the premise that they are causally related, then why can't seeds of wheat produce human beings? Because they are other. Then the point that is affirmed by the one who says no is that no, but there is a relationship between cause and effect, but nevertheless they are distinct elements. For example, the seed of a certain plant, an olive tree seed, for example, is not the same as the olive tree. It doesn't have the appearance or the properties of the tree. They're not identical. Nevertheless, they share a special relationship. One leads to producing the other, but because they have separate characteristics, they are separate entities. Nevertheless, one produces the other. So then the analysis is causality. We often imagine it in terms of time. At the moment when the seed is present, we don't see the seed. When the tree is present, we don't see the seed. When we see the cause, the effect is not present. When we see the effect, the cause is no longer present. So how can these two entities be in relation? How can they be connected? If they are two entities, even if they have a relationship, an intimate relationship, it has to happen at a certain moment. So how can the seed produce its effect as a separate entity if it is never connected to the effect? How can the cause produce the effect if it doesn't come into contact, if it's not in relation to the effect at some point? Because when the cause is present, the effect is not present. And when the effect is present, the cause is not present. So they're never, for them to be in a relation of causality, in terms of two substantial, existential, independent entities, for them to be in a causal relationship, then at some point they have to have a relationship of some kind, this relationship of causality. But every time that we observe, we see that when we see one, the other is absent. So how does this happen? We can imagine that there is a moment, a specific moment. The seed transforms into a seedling, but before it's a seedling, it's still a seed itself. And then it starts to produce the effect. And so then at this moment, it's two entities that are related. We can imagine this. But if these two entities, this is an analysis of causality in terms of time, if they are dissociated by time, they're never in contact. If they are two substantially existing independent entities, they're never in contact. Necessarily, there has to be simultaneity of the cause and the effect. If they're substantially independent of each other in order for them to be in a causal relationship. There has to be simultaneity. But if they are simultaneously present, then somehow then they're no longer in a causal relationship. Because they are existentially independent. That's like two people who are shaking hands or holding hands. They're not in a causal relationship, they're just in contact. They're in contact in terms of being two existentially, substantially independent entities. We're no longer considering a relationship of dependence. Any two elements can be simultaneously present together. This doesn't necessarily imply mutual dependence. So we cannot establish how two entities that have substantial being in and of themselves can be in a causal relationship. A causal relationship means that they are existentially dependent. But if they are substantially separate, this excludes any existential dependence. So we can see that phenomena that appear do not appear with being in and of themselves. They weren't produced by anything external, some substantial other. We can also imagine, in fact, the cause and the effect are one and the same thing. In fact, simply they are two different appearances. Thinking, for example, that the seed that produces a tree, well, the tree is the same entity. They are the same thing. They're just two different moments of the same thing. This comes back to saying, if we take it again in the substantial sense, these phenomena truly exist, the effect and the cause. If it is this, if the effect is the same thing as the cause, if the tree and the cause are one, the tree and the seed are one, this means that the tree must exist inside the seed. If they are one, well, we can certainly say that they are existentially not distinct, but this is contrary to observation. Why would the tree need to manifest if it is already fully in the seed? If the effect is contained in the cause, then why would the effect need to manifest? So this is contrary to, in other words, we cannot establish that phenomena come to manifest with being in and of themselves due to the fact that they are produced by something other or that they are produced by themselves. So we can imagine in the context of a theistic observation of the creation of the world, we could think that God and his creation are two distinct phenomena, that God and his phenomena are one and the same thing. We can find these types of theories. But these correspond with the two theories that we've just refuted. Okay, but then there's a third possibility that we considered. This corresponds with the philosophy of the Jaina, who understand both to be true. A potter that creates a pot, the pot comes from l'argile, clay. So the pot comes from clay. The pot already existed in the clay, so then it's produced from itself, but at the same time, it's necessary to have an association with an external activity, the potter. So the pot comes from itself, but also from an outer entity. So the pot comes to be based on itself and also based on the action of an outer phenomena. So this combines the two previous theories. In other words, something being produced by something else or something being produced by itself. The refutation here is very simple. Two impossibilities added together don't make a possibility. If production based on itself can't be established, and production based on other cannot be established, then combining them together does not make a third possibility. To give a very simple example, if John did not commit a crime and Jack did not commit a crime, we can't accuse John and Jack of having committed a crime together. Two impossibilities added together do not make a possibility. So then this brings us to the fourth possibility, based on nothing. Without cause. That an effect manifests without there being any cause. If this were possible, that effects could manifest without causes and conditions, then there's no reason for this to not constantly be occurring. There's no reason why at this exact moment a universe does not appear in my glass. Anything could appear in any way at any moment, but then we would be able to observe manifestation occurring without causes and conditions. So in this way, we can see that we cannot find this, that all phenomena that we observe, all appearances, are not established as substance due to the fact that they were produced as a substance. We cannot observe their substantial manifestation, neither being produced by themselves, neither being produced by another. So in this sense, reality, appearances, I say reality, but really appearances are unborn. They were never born in terms of birth as a substantial entity. So in this sense, matter, appearances that manifest as matter, are not established as substance due to the fact that they were never produced as a substance. They are without birth. They are unborn. Perhaps you have questions on this subject? Rinpoche, when we talk about cause and effect, this brings me to karma. Karma is emptiness. Yes, karma is emptiness. But so then we get all worked up about nothing. Isn't that the conclusion? I'm not sure how to reply to your question. Okay. What we'll see here is that saying that karma is emptiness does not mean that karma does not exist, that karma is a non-being. That's the subtlety of this term. The subtlety of what is affirmed in this text. What is emptiness is dependent arising. Emptiness and dependent arising are synonyms. So affirming the emptiness of all phenomena from matter up through omniscience, it is not affirming any kind of non-existence. It is also not affirming any substance. There is nothing that we can reify because reification is ignorance. Attribution, it is either false attribution or denial. Reality is free from attribution and denial. So long as we are caught up in these false attributions and denial, confusion continues. We are subject to suffering. Once we can free ourselves from these attributions and denials, then we are in accordance with reality. We are no longer confused. And then suffering and the perpetuation of samsara cease. Considering that we're trying to break down our reifications, there's something that I always wind up reifying that I never managed to deconstruct. It's not in terms of efficiency or functioning. It's a fact of experience being reproducible. For an example, whatever era that we're in, a man, a human of a culture, of any culture, 5,000 years ago or today, if you bring together wood and friction, it makes fire. So, I don't know, the fact that things are emptiness, there's a kind of flexibility, but then why? Rinpoche says, well, emptiness doesn't mean that anything can produce anything. Okay, says the questioner, things are not without cause, but the fact that we have this, that things can be reproduced, it makes things seem solid to me. I don't know how to express it. If you can help me get out of this mistake. Well, if I understand correctly, there is the idea that certain conditions always bring certain effects. This could lead us to think that there are certain laws, for example, and that these laws establish the foundation of reality. In fact, these laws only reflect our understanding, our own observation that when certain conditions and certain circumstances are brought together, they reproduce this or that type of effect. This type of law is also a meaning of the term dharma. The Buddha observed certain laws also, we could say. If hatred arises, then suffering and pain always follows. That's a kind of law. This is the reason why, for example, we distinguish between, or why we speak of two truths: ultimate truth and relative truth. These two truths are not mutually exclusive, but why are the false appearances of relative truth called a kind of truth? Because they are effective, because they function. This is why we speak of truth. But however, despite the fact that there are these laws and these ways of functioning, it doesn't mean that there is a substantiality. Karma doesn't function because there is something substantial. The fact that we reify it is from our own confusion. Karma functions because there is no substantiality. Fire can, based on certain conditions, be present, but not because there is something that establishes a fire. Indeed, it is because there is not substantiality. I can hit the table with my hand, and then my hand will hurt. We might think that this is a proof that the table exists. In fact, this is the proof that the table is emptiness. Because if the table existed, I wouldn't be able to hit it with my hand because it is a being. It's something that is substantially, and therefore it cannot change. It cannot enter into, have any interaction with anything. It cannot have any kind of function. Emptiness, often when we think about emptiness, we have this tendency to reify it and think about nothingness or a vacuum. But I observe something, so there must be something. So as I was saying, false attribution or denial. When we observe something, we grasp it, thinking of it as existing as it appears, and then we attribute the substance to it. And when then someone says, no, that's not it, then we're immediately in denial. Okay, it doesn't exist. No, we're not saying that appearances don't exist. We're saying that our cognitive attribution concerning appearances, the fact that we think of them as existing as they appear, is mistaken. That this reification that we carry out is mistaken.
There's a very good example for this. We think of water as the quality of putting out fire.
He's speaking in English.
Wasser kann Feuer löschen.
One of the power plant destruction places in Germany, there was a fire of natrium.
Und da war wohl ein Feuer
Actually,
in Deutschland.
The power plant, and they thought of, we will put out the fire with water. Maybe you know what happens if you put water onto natrium. The fire is growing very big. So it's not an inherent quality of water putting out fire. It depends on circumstances.
Eigenschaft von Wasser Feuer zu löschen, das hängt von den Bedingungen ab. Ja, ein gutes Beispiel. Es gibt da viele Möglichkeiten.
I think we'll conclude here. It's lunchtime, the bell rang, but we'll come back to this point this afternoon. We'll also have more time for questions. Think about it, reflect. I wish you all a good meal.
예, 담치 시바니 토네 예베 다남 팜치 제가 나지 발람 주바 시베 솔렌 주바